They whispered her name the way others whispered ghost stories, half fear, half awe. Some called her Etta, others Hell's Widow. But across the plantations of East Texas, she was known simply as the woman you never touched. In a world where slave women were expected to be silent, compliant, and broken, Etta was none of those things. She carried herself like a coiled blade, sharp, controlled, waiting. Overseers never met her eye. Planters avoided walking too close. Even slaves lowered their voices when she passed, because trouble followed her like a shadow. The rumors were unbelievable. They said she once snapped a man's wrist with 2 fingers. They said she slept with a razor stitched into her hair. They said she kept a jar buried behind the smokehouse filled with the shriveled remains of 5 men who tried to inspect her in the dark of night. Most stories were exaggerated, but not all of them were lies, because 5 planters really did try, and 5 planters really did scream. This is the tale of the most dangerous woman in Texas, the one who refused to bow, refused to break, and made every man who touched her regret he had a pear between his legs. Etta was born on the hottest day of 1839, when the air hung thick like boiling syrup and the cattle wouldn't move from the shade. Her mother, Ada, had given birth in the cotton fields, her fingers still sticky with sap. The overseer didn't stop the line. He simply waved her to the side and told her to finish delivering before lunchtime. Etta entered the world not with a cry, but with her eyes wide open, dark, watchful, unblinking. Ada used to say that was the first sign she would never be normal. "She ain't scared," the midwife muttered, washing the newborn with creek water. "No," Ada whispered, "but something in this world should be scared of her." Growing up on the Rutherford plantation, Etta learned early what men were capable of. The girls whispered warnings about night visits, wandering hands, and special favors expected behind the smokehouse. No girl escaped it for long, except Etta. At 13, she was already tall and strong, her shoulders broad from hauling cotton sacks twice her size. But it wasn't strength that protected her, it was the stare. That dead calm, razor-sharp stare that made grown men hesitate before stepping too close. Once, an overseer reached for her braid. She didn't slap his hand. She didn't scream. She simply leaned her face so close to his that he could feel her breath and said, low and even, "Touch me again and I'll feed the dogs what you try to put on me." The overseer laughed at first, but days later he was found with a mangled hand inside the hog pen. Some said he slipped. Some said Etta pushed. Some said she caught his hand where it didn't belong and cracked it before tossing him to the hogs. Nobody dared ask her. By 16, rumors wrapped around her like armor. Some feared her, some adored her, and some, like the white planters who visited Rutherford, were dangerously curious. Men with money and power loved testing boundaries, and Etta was a boundary they were eager to break. The first planter came one summer night, when the moon was thin and yellow. Etta was carrying water from the potting shed when she heard footsteps behind her, slow, confident, the kind of steps men used when they believed you couldn't say no. He grabbed her wrist. "You're a pretty one," he breathed, wine-sour and smiling. "Let me look at what Mr. Rutherford's been hiding." Etta didn't tremble. She didn't plead. She looked down at his hand on her wrist, then up at his eyes, and said, "You got till the count of 3 to leave with everything you came with." He laughed. He didn't laugh long. Later that night, the plantation doctor stitched him up while he screamed into a rolled-up cloth. Rumor said she kicked him so hard he'd never father a child again. Some said she used a hidden blade. Others claimed she'd simply torn him with her bare hands. The truth didn't matter. What mattered was this. From that night on, every man in Texas knew the same warning. Never try to inspect Etta unless you're ready to lose what you came to inspect. The plantation never said the word castration, but everyone felt it in the air. The day after Etta crippled the visiting planter, the whole yard moved like it was walking on broken glass. The slaves whispered in clumps, eyes darting toward the big house. The overseers kept their whips close, expecting rage from above. But Mr. Rutherford didn't explode. He didn't punish Etta. He didn't punish anyone. He just got very, very quiet. Quiet was worse. Etta sensed it too, like storm clouds gathering behind a shut door. She waited all day for the blow to fall. But it didn't. Not that day. Not the next. Rutherford wasn't done with her. Men like him didn't let things go. They let vengeance simmer. But Etta didn't flinch. She kept working, kept hauling, kept staring men down until they remembered she wasn't prey. Still, the planter who left the yard half a man wasn't the last to try his luck. For reasons only arrogance could explain, more men came. Some were friends of Rutherford who thought the story exaggerated. Some were drunk. Some were simply so used to taking what they wanted, they couldn't imagine a woman, especially a slave, taking something back. Etta didn't seek trouble. Trouble sought her. The second man came a month later, a tall, red-haired tobacco planter from Nacogdoches who fancied himself charming. He waited until the afternoon heat drove the workers inside and found Etta alone in the cane shed, sharpening hoes. He walked in smiling. "You're the famous girl," he said, leaning in the doorway. "The wild one. The one with the bite." Etta didn't look up. "Get out," he laughed. Now, no need for that. I just want to see if the stories about you are true." He reached for his belt. He never got it unbuckled. In one fluid motion, Etta flipped the sharpened hoe, caught him by the collar, and pulled him forward. His knee hit the dirt as she pressed the cold metal edge between his legs. "You think you're special?" she asked, voice low and steady. "You think you're the first man tried this? The first fool?" He froze. She didn't. When she let go of him, he rolled on the ground, screaming, clutching what she had removed. His howl echoed across the fields like a wounded hog. That night, she hid the bloody piece at the back of the smokehouse, wrapped in burlap and salt. She didn't keep it as a trophy. She kept it as a warning. The third attack came only 2 weeks after that. This one was younger, a plantation heir with soft hands and expensive boots. He cornered her behind the well, thinking her reputation was just slave gossip, something to laugh about. He didn't laugh for long. It was fast, silent, almost clean. A knee, a twist, a rip. By then, word had spread that Etta didn't bluff. But instead of stopping the men, the rumors made them stranger, half a challenge, half a dare. Maybe she got some voodoo on her. She can't do that to every man. She ain't that strong. Men who never feared consequences now feared the loss of the one thing they valued most. But fear didn't stop, it tempted them. Etta wasn't proud of what she'd done. She never bragged. But she didn't apologize either. Every time a man forced himself on a girl, the plantation called it nature. But when a girl fought back, suddenly it was violence. Etta knew that kind of world needed new rules, and she was willing to write them in blood. The fourth and fifth men came together drunk one night after gambling with Rutherford in the parlor. They cornered her behind the livestock barn, confident 2 men could handle 1 woman. They were right if she had been any other woman. But Etta didn't panic. She waited, and when one grabbed her arms and the other tried to pin her, she struck like a rattlesnake with nothing to lose. It was messy. It was loud. Both men left pieces of themselves behind on the barn floor. The next morning, the yard was silent. Even the overseers avoided eye contact with her. The slaves stared at her like she was walking with thunder in her chest. No one knew where Etta got the jars. No one knew where she hid them. But everyone knew what was inside them. 5 reminders, 5 warnings, 5 pieces of men who thought she couldn't fight back. People started calling her a monster, but the slave women, they called her something else. Hope. Because for the first time in Texas history, a woman had made the planters afraid. The rumor did not travel by horse or by stagecoach. It traveled on breath. From one trembling mouth to another, through cotton fields, cane rows, smokehouses, wash yards, creek banks, and wagon roads, until every plantation within 40 miles whispered the same sentence. "There's a woman on the Rutherford place who makes men eunuchs." Some said she carried a hidden knife. Some said she fought like a panther high on lightning. Others insisted she used roots and powders from Haiti, something ancient that could unman a man with a touch. But the real story was simpler and more terrifying. Etta did not fear men. And that alone made her dangerous enough to become legend. Around the 5th week, a man arrived whose name everyone knew: Cassius Terrell, overseer of the infamous Terrell cotton fields. A tall, mean-eyed man who carried cruelty like a second spine. He'd beaten 3 slaves to death in the previous year alone, and the law barely blinked. He didn't come to buy cotton. He came to see her. Etta sensed him before she saw him, the barn door creaking slow, the heavy steps of someone who enjoyed being watched. She turned and found him grinning, his teeth sharp as if he'd filed them himself. "You the one causing all the trouble?" Cassius asked. "No trouble here," she replied. "Just work. Men say you got a habit. Something real, unusual." He took a step closer. "You really cut him? Just like that?" Etta didn't answer. "Some men didn't deserve words." Cassius laughed. "I like a woman with teeth. But you ain't gonna try that foolishness on me." He grabbed her wrist. He made one mistake. He thought she needed her hands. In a single motion, she twisted her body, dropped her weight, and swept his knee from under him. Before he hit the ground, she was behind him, her elbow digging into his throat, her knee pinning his arm. He choked. He thrashed. He lost. Cassius Tyrrell limped home half a man, and the field celebrated in silence. That was the moment the legend stopped being rumor and became law. Rutherford's plantation, once known for brutality, took on a new identity entirely, a place where planters were afraid to step wrong, where overseers watched their own hands before touching anyone, where the women walked with their heads a little higher, knowing one of their own had broken the rules and lived. Etta didn't ask for their admiration. Most days, she didn't even want their attention. She'd always been somebody who preferred the corner of a room to the center of it. But the women came to her anyway. First timidly, then in groups, eventually boldly, like worshippers approaching a shrine. "Miss Etta, how you do it?" "Miss Etta, you ain't scared they gon' kill you?" "Miss Etta, can you teach me?" She didn't teach them to cut. She taught them to stand, how to brace their feet, how to twist a wrist, where to strike so a man dropped fast enough for escape. She didn't give them weapons. She gave them a spine, and little by little, the plantation began to shift quiet, as a shadow lengthening across red earth. But there was something else growing too, not admiration, not hope, something darker. Because the more men Etta stopped, the more men wanted to stop her, not one at a time, not drunkenly, not impulsively, but organized, calculated, the kind of plotting that brewed in smoking rooms and whiskey parlors, where slave owners whispered about discipline, respect, order, and a woman who needed removing. It wasn't fear anymore. It was vengeance, and vengeance in Texas rarely came alone. One night, one of the kitchen girls slipped into Etta's cabin with eyes wide and shaking. "Miss Etta, they got a plan," she whispered. "6 of 'em, maybe more. They say they gon' do to you what you did to them men. But worse." Etta didn't move, didn't gasp, didn't tremble. She simply tied her hair with a strip of cloth and lifted her chin. "Let 'em come." The girl stared at her as if she were made from iron pulled straight from the forge. But Etta wasn't made of iron. She was made of something harder, experience. By midsummer, the plantation walked differently, quieter, warier, as if the very dirt knew it was holding secrets that could shatter the world. And at the center of it all moved Etta, the girl the slaves whispered prayers over and the men whispered curses about. But the only whisper that mattered came from the big house. Master Rutherford was done tolerating rumors, done ignoring the humiliation, done pretending he hadn't lost control. His overseers knew it. His guests knew it. Even the field hands felt it in their bones. He was about to do something stupid, something fatal. It began with dinner guests. 2 wealthy ranchers from Galveston had come for a weekend of drinking, boasting, and planning a business deal involving horses, or, more accurately, stolen horses. As the men drank themselves into cruel confidence, the topic shifted toward Etta. One of the ranchers leaned back in his chair and laughed. "Now tell us true, Rutherford, how you let a skinny slave girl scare 5 grown men into squealing like hogs." Rutherford's jaw tightened. His face turned a slow, violent shade of red. But instead of exploding, he forced a smile. "Gentlemen, don't believe everything you hear. The girl ain't magic. She just needs correction." The ranchers grinned. "Then why haven't you done it?" A pause. A long, thin pause. Rutherford lifted his glass, swirling the whiskey, pretending he wasn't picturing the truth. 5 of his equals reduced to shaking wrecks, their manhood left in jars somewhere on his property. "She'll be dealt with," he said through clenched teeth. "I'm just waiting for the right moment." That moment came sooner than he expected. 2 days later, he sent for her. A boy from the big house arrived at the slave cabins breathless. "Etta, master wants you, now." Every worker froze. Some dropped tools. Some whispered prayers. Some looked at Etta like this was the day she wouldn't return. Etta wiped her hands on her skirt. Her heart didn't race. Her breath didn't shake. She had known the summons would come eventually. "Tell him I'm coming," she said. When she walked to the big house, she didn't walk like a frightened girl. She walked like someone who'd faced worse. Inside, Rutherford waited in his office, the door shut, the windows locked. A single lantern burned on the desk, throwing sharp shadows across the room. He didn't tell her to sit. "You've made a fool out of me," he began quietly. Not angry, not shouting. Quiet, the kind of quiet men use right before they light a fuse. Etta said nothing. "You hurt 5 men, embarrassed them, ruined them, and I let it pass because I thought fear would tame you." He stepped closer. "But you ain't tame. You ain't even human no more." Etta's voice was soft. "You the one who made me this way." His face twisted. "You little monster." Then he reached for the drawer. Etta watched his hand, watched the metal glint, watched the mistake happen in slow, stupid motion. Because Rutherford didn't pull out a whip or shackles. He pulled out a branding iron, small, thin, freshly heated. Etta saw the faint glow at the tip. She smelled the iron. She understood instantly he meant to mark her, claim her, fix his pride on her skin. But he didn't understand her the way he thought. Etta didn't fear the pain. She feared the meaning. The symbol on that iron would mark her forever, a testimony that she was owned, that she had been put back in her place. Rutherford stepped forward. "Hold still." Etta didn't. The moment he lifted the iron, she lunged, not backward, not sideways, but forward. The desk tipped. Papers flew. The lantern wobbled, flames licking the glass. Rutherford shouted, grabbing her arm. But Etta twisted, breaking his grip, and her elbow cracked against his jaw. The iron hit the floor with a heavy clank. She didn't pick up a weapon. She didn't need one. Instead, she grabbed the only thing Rutherford never expected. The branding iron itself. It seared her palm. The pain was blinding. But Etta held on. Hot metal hissed. The smell of burnt skin filled the room. Rutherford lunged, and Etta pressed the glowing iron straight across his hand. The scream that tore out of him wasn't human. It echoed through the halls, past the kitchen, past the servants, all the way to the yard. He stumbled back, cradling his smoking hand, eyes wide with a terror he had never felt in his life. You burned me," he gasped, shaking. "You dare." Etta stared him down, breathing through the pain in her palm. "You was gonna mark me," she said. "So I marked you first." For the first time since he owned her, Rutherford truly looked afraid of her, not because she was strong, but because she was willing. Willing to fight, willing to bleed, willing to hurt him back. He didn't call the overseers. He didn't shout for help. He just trembled, clutching his ruined hand, seeing the truth. The girl he thought he owned had become the one thing no master could control. A force, a threat, a consequence. News didn't stay in the big house long. Within an hour, the entire plantation buzzed. Etta branded the master, and somewhere deep in the cabins, the women smiled. Because at last, someone was giving the masters a taste of the fear they fed others. The fourth man did not come in the night like the others. He came at dawn bold, confident, certain that a woman alone in a cabin could not bruise his pride or threaten his manhood. His name was Cyrus Maddox, a man known across 3 counties for breaking slaves who resisted inspection. He had broken more men than mules, and rumor said he once carved his initials into a woman's thigh just to see if she would scream. He believed himself a legend. He did not know he was walking toward the end of it. Cyrus arrived at the small settlement with 2 other riders, men who smirked and joked about what they assumed would be an easy task. They did not bother to hide it. White men never hid things when they thought the world itself existed to serve them. "Boss says she's dangerous," one laughed. "Boss said lots of things," Cyrus replied. "A woman ain't dangerous unless a man lets her be." He dismounted with the swagger of someone who feared nothing, least of all the warnings that had begun to spread through the region, stories of a Texas slave woman who mutilated any man foolish enough to lay hands on her. The rumors had weight, but Cyrus dismissed them with a grin. "Woman cut 5 men," he scoffed. "Then she's had practice. Good. I like a challenge." The men stayed behind, ready to ride at the first sound of trouble. They never heard any. Amara was sitting on her porch when Cyrus approached calm, weaving a thin braid of sweetgrass, as if dawn were just dawn and not the prelude to blood. She watched him without emotion, and he mistook her silence for fear. "You know why I'm here," he announced, rolling his shoulders like a bull preparing to charge. Amara did not move. "Do you?" Her voice was soft, too soft, he thought. A woman's voice. A harmless voice. He took it as permission to step closer. "Boss wants you inspected," he said. "He wants a report. Says you cut his son's friends. Funny thing, that." He leaned forward. "You ain't gone cut me." Amara looked up finally, eyes steady, unreadable. "What makes you think that?" "Because I'll tie your hands before you even blink." "Try." He laughed loud, full, the kind of laugh men used when they needed to convince themselves they were still in control. He shouldn't have blinked. When he opened his eyes again, she was no longer sitting on the porch. She was standing, and in her hand was something he could not see until it glinted. The razor. Small, thin, deadly. The same tool-field slaves used to cut cane, and sometimes other things. Cyrus lunged, but Amara didn't run. She moved not fast, but precise, practiced, as if she had rehearsed this moment for years. She sidestepped his reach, twisted, and drew a single slash across the inside of his thigh. Not deep, not lethal, but perfectly placed. Cyrus stumbled, shocked. "You!" His voice cracked. His leg buckled. He had no idea she knew exactly where a man's strength lived. "You should sit," she said softly. He collapsed instead. The other riders heard a thud, but not a cry. So they stayed where they were, bored, picking at dirt under their nails, assuming Cyrus was doing what men like him always did. Inside the cabin, Cyrus was not bored. He was panting, sweating, clutching his thigh as blood seeped through his fingers. Amara tied his hands behind him with the calmness of someone braiding hair. Every knot she made looked delicate, but held like iron. "You think you're the first to come here?" she murmured. Cyrus tried to speak, but his throat had dried like old leather. "You won't be the last either." She crouched beside him. "But you will be remembered." He swallowed. "They're outside. They won't come in," she replied. "Men like them don't risk themselves for men like you." And she was right. The riders waited and waited, never once thinking their leader needed help. Inside, Cyrus tried to wriggle free. He failed. Amara stood over him, her shadow long in the dawn light. She tilted her head. "You're strong," she said. "But strength doesn't make you safe." She placed the razor to his throat, not cutting yet, simply resting it there like a promise. "What do you want?" He choked. "To finish what you came here to start." His breath caught. "Inspection," she whispered. With one swift motion, she sliced downward, not across his throat, but deeper, lower, into the last place any man wanted a blade. Cyrus screamed, finally loud enough for the riders to hear. They turned. They hesitated. And then they ran. They did not wait to see if Cyrus survived. They did not check the cabin. They did not look back. They fled like hunted animals, kicking dust behind them until the horizon swallowed their silhouettes. Inside, Cyrus lay trembling, barely conscious. Amara wiped the blade clean, slow and methodical. Then she stepped back onto the porch, sat, and resumed weaving her sweetgrass braid, her hands steady, her breathing even. Behind her, Cyrus Maddox gurgled a mangled string of pleas that would never be answered. She finished the braid, hung it on the doorpost, a warning, a marker, a promise. The fourth man would never break anyone again, and Amara was far from finished. The sun had barely set before the Red River began, its quiet roar slow, thick, and brown, moving like molasses under a heavy sky. The men had dragged Yvette toward it once, years ago, trying to rinse the Haitian devil out of her. But she had walked out of the water on her own feet and left one of them missing 2 fingers. She never forgot that night. And tonight, she intended to rewrite it. Because tonight, she chose the river. A storm crawled over Texas, slow as a blind horse but twice as heavy. Clouds split open with flashes that made the cane fields glow white, then black, then white again. Yvette watched from the edge of the tree line, her silhouette still as carved stone. 6 men were gathered by the old slaughter shed, the same men who believed the world rotated around their whims. The same men who, only 3 days earlier, had pinned her wrists, pulled up her dress, and touched her skin with the boldness of those who never fear consequences. Tonight they feared. They didn't know why yet, but their bodies knew. Their hands shook while they smoked. Their laughter kept breaking. They turned their heads too sharply. Even the horses sidestepped and refused to face the shed. It was instinct, the same instinct animals feel when a wolf is near. Yvette stepped forward. The storm rolled, low and guttural, as if the sky itself recognized her. She carried nothing in her hands, no blade, no hammer, no rope, but each step she took made the grass bow down and whisper. She no longer hid her presence. The plan for tonight required fear as much as skill, and she intended to give them both. The tallest man, Bo Thatch, the self-appointed leader, noticed her first. His cigarette slipped from his lips. "You," he croaked. Yvette smiled. A smile without warmth, without mercy, without even disdain, just intention. The men drew their guns, but not one fired. Their hands trembled too badly to pull triggers. "What you want?" one stuttered. She stepped closer. The storm answered for her, a crack of lightning that illuminated her face, made her eyes shine white. She looked unbothered by the rain, which now beat against the earth like fists. Water slicked her hair, her skin, her dress, but she walked as if wrapped in sunlight. "I came for what you owe," she said softly. A man swallowed. "We ain't owe you." Before he finished, she was standing in front of him. The river wind had not even carried her steps. She reached up, touched his jaw gently as if greeting an old lover, then slammed her knee upward. The crack was sharp. He dropped to the ground, choking, curling, wheezing. One down, the rest froze. Something ancient in their bones screamed at them to run, but pride held them rooted like drunk cattle. "You think you can take us all?" Bo shouted, trying to sound powerful over the thunder. Yvette tilted her head. "I already have." As if on cue, the lights inside the slaughter shed flickered, the lanterns going out one by one, from the back of the room to the front. The sound was unmistakable, footsteps dragging, something moving within. "Oh God, a man whimpered. They thought it was ghosts." In truth, Yvette had freed the 4 enslaved boys, tied inside earlier that evening. Now those boys were slipping out the back, crawling through the cane toward the tree line, away from danger, toward a future. The men finally fired. Gunshots cracked through the storm, but the bullets didn't hit her. They hit the dirt, the shed, the trees. Their hands simply wouldn't obey. Every time they raised an arm, it dropped half an inch too low. Every time they aimed, the wind seemed to shove the barrel aside. They cursed, panicked, stumbled backward. "What are you?" one yelled. Yvette stopped in front of Bo. Lightning lit her face again. "Your consequence." She reached down, grabbed a branding hook from the shed wall, still warm from the earlier fire she had prepared. Their own symbol glowed red at the tip like a watching eye. The men scrambled, slipping in mud, screaming through the roar of rain. Bo tried to run. He made it 3 steps. Yvette pressed the red-hot iron against the back of his neck. His howl rose above the storm. The others watched in horror as their leader fell face first into the mud, the symbol seared onto his skin, burning through flesh, marking him with the very emblem he had used to terrorize others. 5 men remained. 5 men who once treated her body like property. Now they ran toward the river, hoping its wide mouth would protect them. Yvette followed slowly, her bare feet sinking into the soaked earth, her expression calm, unwavering, holy in its fury. The red river churned as they reached its edge. Lightning struck again, bright enough to turn the world white. Yvette's shadow stretched across the ground like a specter. "No," Bo moaned from the mud, barely conscious. "No, not the river." But Yvette did not look back. She stepped into the water, its surface swirling around her calves like living ink. The 5 men screamed her name as if it were a curse. She smiled. Tonight, it became one. 5 men splashed backward, tripping over themselves as the river turned black beneath them, thick, swirling, swallowing. Yvette raised her hand. The wind obeyed, the river surged, and the night became theirs. By dawn, the entire county buzzed with a single rumor. The devil slave woman was loose, and she carried a sack filled with the parts of men who had wronged her. The name they gave her was meant to frighten children. Instead, it terrified grown men. Planters locked their daughters inside. Sheriffs rode their horses until foam dripped from the bridle. The pastor canceled services, and every white woman whispered her name with a mixture of horror and fascination. Delphine. 8. But the men, the ones who had once laughed at the very idea of a woman fighting back, they formed a hunting party. 16 rifles, 10 hounds, 3 wagons, 1 mission. Kill the slave woman who had unmanned their own. But Delphine didn't run. She waited. She knew these men. Men who believed that every dark-skinned body was theirs to touch, to own, to break. Men who thought cruelty was a right. Men who thought terror flowed only in one direction. They had no idea that Delphine had grown up in a house where fear was a meal, served 3 times a day. She had been fed terror. She had digested it. She had survived it. Now, she would feed it back. The men split into groups. Cowards always do. Group 1, the Ridge Riders. 3 planters, 2 sons, 1 overseer. They strutted through the pines like they were hunting foxes. They joked about who would get a go at her first once they caught her. They didn't notice the vines wrapped low around their ankles. Not vines. Delphine's traps. The first man screamed when the snare jerked upward, hurling him into the air. His rifle fell, fired, and shot the overseer in the foot. The others twisted, stumbled, then Delphine dropped from the tree like a shadow with teeth. When she rose again, their rifles were on the ground, and their tendons were no longer intact. She didn't stay to watch them bleed. The forest had more visitors. Group 2, the Swamp Brothers. 4 men infamous for pulling runaways out of the bog by their hair. They thought the swamp obeyed them. It obeyed Delphine more. While they trudged knee-deep in the mud, she moved silently across the roots like the swamp had memorized her feet. Their first mistake was shouting her name. Their second was thinking she wouldn't answer. She blew a handful of crushed nightshade into the wind. Minutes later, the brothers began choking, eyes burning, throats swelling, clawing at their own tongues. Only then did Delphine step out of the reeds, calm as moonlight on water. "You took from me," she whispered. "Now the swamp takes from you." It did. It took everything. Group 3, the Horsemen. 6 riders who prided themselves on breaking stallions and women with equal cruelty. They rode fast, rifles drawn, scanning the cane rows. Then they heard it. A whistle, soft, slow, familiar, the same sound they used to summon dogs. Only this time, they were the hunted animals. Delphine had led them straight across a field of buried embers, hot coals left from the kiln where she'd forged horseshoes for years. The horses panicked. 2 reared and fell. 1 rider broke his neck instantly. The others scrambled on foot, but Delphine was already in the rows, moving like a spirit. 1 man shouted her name. Another called her a monster. A third begged for mercy. Delphine stepped out behind them. "You all mistook my quiet for weakness," she said softly. Her knife answered the rest. By nightfall, 16 armed men had become a whisper on the wind. The county would search for them for weeks. They would find scraps of clothing, boot prints that led nowhere, rifles rusting in mud, tracks that stopped mid-stride. But they would never find the men. Not whole, anyway. And Delphine? She walked back toward the horizon, toward a freedom she had carved with her own hands, one cruelty at a time. She no longer ran. She no longer hid. She no longer feared. Now others feared her. Night fell over Easton like a velvet shroud, thick enough to hide sins and sharpen fear. Cicadas screamed in the tree line. The wind carried the smell of dust and fear, and the stars watched with cold indifference. But it was the sound faint at first, like distant thunder that roused every creature in the pines. Hooves. Fast. Many. The riders were coming. 6 men, all mounted, silhouettes cutting through the dark, heading toward the plantation road with a single purpose: find the woman, Eva, alive or dead. Their orders were simple, their revenge, personal, their arrogance, absolute. But their ignorance, fatal. They assumed she had fled blindly into the brush, that she was desperate, panicked, unarmed. They did not know she had spent half her life studying the trails like scripture reading, wind, predicting movement, knowing where a rider must slow, where a horse must hesitate, where fear itself could be weaponized. They did not know she had been preparing for this night since the first time a man laid an unwanted hand on her. The riders reached the narrow stretch where the cane row path met the deep pines. The leader, Rankin Crow, lifted his fist to halt the group. "Spread out. She bleedin'. Ain't far." But the ground was too quiet. No scurrying animals, no shifting branches, no breath but their own. One rider muttered, "Feels wrong out here." Rankin snorted. "Only thing wrong is letting a woman make fools out of grown men." Another chimed in. "Ain't no woman gonna." Something thudded. Soft. Wet. A horse whinnied, backing up. The men turned. One of their riders was slumped sideways in his saddle, throat opened ear to ear, eyes still blinking in shock as he slid off the horse and hit the ground without a sound. No gunshot, no warning, just death. "Where's she at?" Rankin roared, spinning in the saddle. "Show yourself," a whisper answered from the darkness. "I already did." The remaining riders snapped their heads toward the voice too late. A blade glided low beneath the next horse, slicing it across the foreleg. The animal screamed, collapsing sideways onto its rider. Bones cracked. The man howled, pinned under half a ton of thrashing muscle until the blade ended him with a clean thrust. 4 left. They fired into the trees wildly, shots sparking, lighting glimpses of pine bark and leaves, but no woman. "She's behind that log. She's up in the tree. She's everywhere." "No," Rankin snarled. "She's one woman." Fan out. Something slammed into him from above. Not a body. A rope. A noose. It whipped around his neck before he registered the weight, tightening with a snap as a counterweight dropped from the branch overhead. Rankin yanked, clawing at his throat, but the more he struggled, the tighter it cinched. His horse panicked, rearing, and the combination jerked Rankin upward. His boots kicked at the air as branches scraped his shoulders. "Cut him down!" One rider screamed. The others fumbled with knives and reins, and that was when the forest itself seemed to shift. Eva stepped out from behind a pine trunk like a ghost that had been waiting there for centuries. Silent, expressionless, blood splattered, barefoot. Her eyes were not wild, no. They were cold, the eyes of a woman who had finally carved her own destiny out of men who believed she could never lift the knife against them. One rider charged her with his horse, swinging a pistol like a club. Eva dropped to the ground. The horse galloped over her, but its rider did not, because as she rolled beneath the animal's belly, she drove her knife straight upward with perfect precision. The man toppled backward, hitting the ground with a thud, hands clutching a wound he was too shocked to understand. 3 left. 2 of them fled. They did not try to fight. They did not look back. They simply kicked their horses into a dead sprint and tried to outrun the night. But the forest had already chosen its allegiance, and it wasn't theirs. Their flight sent branches snapping, stones clattering, hooves slipping on damp ground. The path narrowed, twisting through darkness like a serpent belly down in the dirt. Eva did not chase them on foot. She didn't need to, because the traps she'd laid long before the riders arrived, snares woven from cane fiber, sharpened stakes hidden beneath pine needles, were waiting exactly where fear would drive them. The first fleeing rider never saw the snare tighten around his ankle. His horse kept running. His leg didn't. The snap of bone echoed like a gunshot. The second fleeing rider disappeared in a sudden downward plunge. His horse stumbled over a pit masked with brush. He hit the ground head first. Silence followed. Only one rider remained. The one frozen in his saddle, staring at Rankin's hanging body, too petrified to move, too afraid to speak. His hands shook so badly he dropped his pistol. Tears welled in his eyes. "Please," he whispered. It was not clear if he spoke to Eva or to God. Eva stepped forward. "You the one who held me down first," she said softly. He swallowed. No, I was trying to stop him." "You laughed." He opened his mouth, maybe to deny it, maybe to beg. He never finished. Eva cut his horse's reins. The panicked animal bolted, dragging the rider through the pine needles, through the brush, through the branches until his body stopped moving. Silence returned. Rankin dangled in the moonlight, the rope creaking gently in the wind like a lullaby. And Eva, she stood in the center of the carnage, chest rising and falling, but her hands steady. It was done. The riders would not reach town. The hunters had become the hunted. The hunted had become free. And the night soaked in vengeance finally lay still. By dawn, the plantation stood hollow and shuddering, like a great creature that had been gutted during the night. Smoke drifted from the ruined barns. Horses had fled. Men who once strutted with whips now lay beneath sheets, their families pretending not to look at the parts missing underneath. But the one thing none of them dared to look at directly was her, the slave woman they once tried to inspect, the one who sent 5 planters screaming into the dark, clutching the last pieces of their manhood as they bled across their own fields. No one spoke her name out loud anymore, not because they had forgotten, but because speaking it felt like stepping barefoot into fire. Some whispered she was Haitian, born with curses braided into her blood. Some whispered she was Texan-born, carved by hardship into a blade so sharp it cut without lifting a hand. Some said she wasn't born at all, that she was something the land itself created in answer to cruelty. But those were stories told behind locked doors. The truth was simpler. She lived, and that terrified them more than any legend. For weeks after the killings, slave patrols hunted the woods, rifles loaded, dogs dragging, sniffing noses along the ground. They followed trails, found traces, broken brush, a dropped scrap of cloth, a heel mark in the mud, but the marks always led nowhere, as if the earth itself swallowed them. One patrol swore they saw her at dusk, standing between the pine trees, staring at them with eyes that didn't blink. They lifted their guns, and she simply stepped back into the darkness, as if it had opened to take her in. Another man claimed he saw her walking along the riverbank with no footprints behind her. Another swore he saw her reflection in a window, though she wasn't in the room. Soon, nobody wanted the reward money. Nobody wanted to track her. Nobody wanted to find her. So the planters boarded up the slave quarters she once lived in, leaving it empty like a room haunted by a ghost, still deciding whether to return. But she never did. Instead, rumors began slipping down the roads like smoke. A white overseer found in Galveston with his throat neatly opened, as if by a razor held by an expert. A man in Houston screaming that someone took him in the dark, someone small, silent, and smiling. A would-be buyer in New Orleans waking up bloodless, bandaged, babbling about a woman who moved like a shadow with a heartbeat. Every story ended the same way. She didn't run. She walked, like the night carried her. And the legend grew. In Texas, she became a warning. In Louisiana, she became a whisper. In Mississippi, she became a sermon. Across the South, she became the one woman no white man wanted to meet alone. The slaves who heard the stories did not fear her. They passed her name from fire pit to fire pit, like a secret blessing. They told their daughters she was proof that a woman could cut her way through hell and still come out walking. They told their sons she was what resistance looked like with teeth. And somewhere, far from the plantation, far from Texas, far from the scream she left behind, a woman with quiet feet and steady hands stepped onto a road that led west. Her hair tied back, her eyes calm, her body unbroken. She had no chains on her wrists. She had no fear in her blood, only purpose. And though no one could say where she went, everyone white and black agreed on one thing. She will always be out there, and she never stops walking.